So I think we'll just start again with introductions for the video. So if you want to do another... Over to you, Kiri.
No, I can't use the joke Adriast. That's unfair. So Kip Kiri is my name. Been at Microsoft as a senior product manager for the last 2 years. Before that, I co-founded and ran a design consulting company called Made by People. Humble brag, Google was one of my clients. Yeah, I can't forget that. It was such a big thing for me. Been in the consulting space for a minute, but in general, my career has been quite dynamic. Started off as a software engineer, somehow transitioned into managing a team of consultants, got into design, and then into product later. I fundamentally identify as a designer. I've just been pushed into product management.
All right. Hi, everyone. How are you doing?
It's off.
Oh, it's off.
You can
Okay.
push it up. Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I must confess something. I am not a product manager, or rather, I have not followed the traditional path of becoming a product manager. I don't consider myself a product manager. However, I've interacted with product development, product management for the past more than 20 years. So that just tells you how old I am. And so I started out my career actually in the healthcare space in the US. Once I finished my undergraduate degree, I actually thought I would become a professor in math. That did not happen because at some point now, let's just say the math was not mathing. And so I just had to face the reality that I needed to, do something completely different. And so my career actually started in customer service. And I will share more about how my career has transitioned since then over the past 20 years. Fast forward, I've been working at Andela for the past 5 years as Director of Strategic Partnerships and Product. I'll talk more about the product bit, but really excited to be here.
The bar is really high. Hi, I'm James. I identify as the Chief Happiness Officer at ADPList and CPO. From a health background as well, I did more into biomedical research. I thought I was going to be a bioinformatician, but unfortunately, I didn't have money to go to school, so yeah. I learned design, one of the first Figma ambassadors, built the first learn design curriculum used in the University of Ghana, was a fellow at MEST, and co-founded ADPList. And on my day-to-day stuff, I do literally basically try to make sure people are not fighting, especially between the designers and engineers, which I'm going to talk more about. And you often find me trying to motivate people to do their best. So yeah, happy to be here.
Check 1, 2. Okay. By show of hands, who's familiar with the organizations that they mentioned? Andela, Microsoft, ADPList. Okay. By show of hands, who thinks that they are successful? These our panelists. Okay. I think it's important to establish that because
before the conversation,
because the whole goal of today's conversation is what? Career success. And so the reason we put together this panel is because we want to talk to successful people, right? And so I think a good place to start is when we talk about like defining success, we've given some of the outcomes we think about. Maybe they are vain. It'd be really helpful to think about it from your perspectives. Like, how do you define success for your careers?
Okay. So for me, it's a hierarchy of sorts. The first part being, I want to be happy with what I'm doing. And that's the primary reason my career has meandered a lot. I've always tried to get in a position where I do things that I find interesting and fulfilling to myself. The second part is money, of course. It's important that you compensated adequately for what you're doing and you build a strong financial future for yourself. The third part, which is also quite critical, is the people that I work with. I think that's very important. And then the last one is the work that we do. And it's not the last in the sense that it's the least important. So as an example, personally, I would not work for a betting company. Yeah, but at the end of the day, career success or how you look at it is entirely up to you and less about what the society says.
Quick follow-up for you, Kiroi. How do you think about success now in the context of tech layoffs, especially when there are circumstances outside of your control that impact your career?
Okay, so we've gotten to a point where we live in a society that there is no guarantee. So concepts like job security, that's not a thing anymore. That's for our parents, people who could work for one company for 30 years or for their entire life. So the way I look at it is I aim to have a run with a company for a certain period of time and then move on to the next thing. And in thinking of it that way, I look at my career as a large experiment where I have predefined periods that helps me move from one step to the other. It won't always work that way. Like there's a time I worked for Andela for only 6 months. I'd planned to do 2 years. Yeah, so success doesn't mean guarantee. It just means doing what you like doing and doing it in such a way that if anything happens, you're in a position to move on to something else.
Same question.
Around career success. How do you define it? Yeah, no, that's a good question. When I think about career success, I think for me, the way in which I define career success has evolved over time and it keeps changing. There was a time in which for me, career success was about, working for this corporate enterprise, working inside one of these glassy, beautiful offices. And that has changed. I had the opportunity of working for a bank and then realized that's not exactly where I fit. And part of the reason is the more, as I've continued to work, one of the things that I've realized what's really important for me is working in an organization where I feel that there's meaning. I've come to define what meaning is to me. Where the organization that I currently work for, Andela, it's around brilliance is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. What I found is that the opportunities that I'm really interested in is where you're able to level the playing field and create access for all, whether it's creating access for jobs, creating access to finance for everyone. It's democratization. So I think that's one of the things that's really important. Compensation is definitely an important piece. I want to make sure that I'm being compensated competitively. And then the other thing is also, I want to make sure that the organization that I'm working for, I'm working in an organization where I can bring my entire self to work. And that's such an important piece. I don't want to pretend to be something that I'm not. And I want to be able to be who I am. I'm a very passionate person, and I happen to be very driven. Actually, my first job was cutting onions, a bag of onions, and then waking up at 2 a.m. and delivering newspapers. And so everything I do, it's not so much about what I do, but it's how I do it, the impacts that can be made, and the team of people, the individuals that I get to work with.
I think for me, 3 specific things, right? How many startups I can launch, how many people I can train, and then when I grow up, how much money I can make. Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to add one point. I think the other thing for me is also failing forward. I've come to recognize that failure is such an important aspect. Like, we don't talk about enough about it. We talk about, yes, the promotions, we talk about the number of launches, but then during that, what I always want to know that, I always want to make sure that I've learned something.
Yeah.
I recently went ahead and launched this product, which was a massive failure, I'll be honest with you, across multiple countries. But I learned so much from it that now when I look at it, actually, I see it as a success because of the learnings that I've now been able to use and adopt in the next product that I launch.
That's so exciting and infectious. Just hearing how also all of you, I think, touch a little bit about impact. I want to especially push on your concise feedback, James, because I think it would be great to hear you talk a little bit about how you think about impact and how that aligns a career strategy that's grounded in reality, especially as an African with not so many opportunities to tap into in the tech space. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think she mentioned something very important, right? A lot of people out here are very talented. Even those who are not can become talented, right? But do we have the access and the opportunities? We do not, right? And maybe I might be talking about ADPList a little, but how do we level the playing field, right? For instance, you are sitting here, you know your stuff, but then do you have the opportunities and access to portray or have that impact that you want to make? You don't, you do not. And so when I think about impact, it's really about how much access I can create for people, how much I can motivate and inspire people to do things they are not even aware they can do, right? And I think that's very important in technology, in the technology ecosystem here, where there is so much gatekeeping, there is so much brain drain, there is so much family and friends, and so many things we can talk about. How do we do this? It's about creating an access, giving out, sharing your knowledge, motivating people to be their best self. And if I can do that at scale, right? To me, that is like literally the best thing that can ever happen to me, doing this at scale. Because again, there are so many people I have conversation with, and I'm like, okay, I talk to one or two people a week and all of those stuff, but how are you thinking about this at scale? Do you recognize the potential of what you can do, or how valuable your knowledge can be to other people? So yeah.
Okay. So we've established whether they're successful, how you all think about success for yourselves in your careers. Yeah. So I think it'll be helpful now to unpack what contributed to your success. And product will be prioritized, right? So if you were to choose the one thing that you think contributed to success in your careers, please share and help us understand that from your perspective. And I think let's start with you, Kiri, especially in the context of a large tech company like Microsoft, from your own career journey and also from the others that you observed around you. What do you think stood out?
So just one thing. One thing. I would say being the firstborn. I got all the nice opportunities. And somehow, if you look at our ecosystem, or if you look at Kenya in general, especially when I was a bit younger, I've actually realized we are the oldest people here. No shit. So I think, to be honest, I got into the industry at a very good time. I got into a space that I actually liked. So originally, I was meant to do an electrical and electronics undergrad, but I discovered computers before that. And I was able to follow my passion and connect with the right people. That gave me the first opportunities. I think at this point in time, especially if you're starting out in your career, it's the first part that makes a big difference. So I was in JQuad. We rebooted the Computer Society there. We started doing more meetups. We started going to the iHub and interacting with like startup founders, people who actually know what they're doing, not just fellow university students. And it was at that point in time when I met Augusta Liko, he's the founder of PesaPal, and then I interned with them. I think that was like the biggest boost that I got. And if I was to simplify it, it's following my passion. Hard to make it one word. Following my passion, being curious and open enough to network and explore opportunities that you can take, and then taking that leap. Because most times, you're taking a leap and you don't know if it will work. Think of it this way. You've just completed your second year. You don't know that much. And you're taking on these huge responsibilities that can backfire. And I feel that has been the consistent theme in my life. Just being at the right place, in the sense that any work that I take on, I push it to the most that I can. And when I get a new opportunity that I think is interesting to me, I take it, even though it might go sideways. Yeah. Okay, those are many one words.
Great summary, though. I guess it doesn't have to be one word.
Yeah. So I think I can relate with what Kiri has said, in the sense that now when I look at my career journey, one of the things that's really helped me is reinventing myself. And the way in which I've been able to do that is through three key things. Number one is learning. Number two is networking. And then number three is radical candor. So let me start with what I mean by radical candor. I've been blessed to have some of the best managers or bosses anyone could ever ask for. And I remember reading this book by, I believe it's the name of the book is Radical Candor, and the author, her first name is Kim, and she talks about how it is so important to provide feedback directly and to be kind as you're delivering that feedback. And I've been fortunate to have bosses who've done that for me. And so I've received constructive feedback that has helped me to continue to improve myself over the years. So that's been really, really helpful. Networking, one of the things that I continue to do, and I'm now getting better at it, is networking and connecting with people internally within the organization and externally outside of the organization, and connecting with people who are within the same industry that I'm in, but also across multiple industries. And it's helped me to connect the dots and to begin to understand, okay, I see how my skills can be used in this domain, but I can also see how my skills and my experience can be transferable across a different industry or across a different vertical. And what that has done is it's helped to open up opportunities that I didn't even realize were there. While we're talking about that, I remember the former COO of Andela, when she was leaving, she gave me one of the best pieces of advice that to this day I always tell people to do, is keep pitching. Even though you are an employee, you still have a brand, right? You still have your own personal brand. So first of all, know your personal brand. What is it? Know your strengths, know your assets, and be proud of it. Spend time understanding who you are, what value you bring to an organization, and keep selling that, or keep pitching that. And the example that she gave me was that even when she was working for an organization that she loved, she would always go for interviews, even though she may not necessarily have taken the job. And the reason for that was she wanted to, first of all, evaluate her skill sets in the marketplace and evaluate her work. But it also gave her an opportunity to also understand, what are people building? What's happening there? And so that I think is such an important piece. And then the last one is learning. I like to join learning communities. I've enrolled in a number of different courses which have helped me over time to continue to build new skills.
All right. This thing keeps. I think for me, biggest contributor is the fact that I teach. So it started when I became a Figma ambassador. I'm always proud to say I'm one of the first Figma ambassadors. That really opened up a lot of opportunities for me because, again, I interact with a lot of young and old and experienced people. And in that interaction, like, okay, you have this design session, you have this thing you need to go and teach people, and you can't go unprepared. You have to learn, you have to prepare and like be ahead of the game and know what exactly you're doing. And to me, it has really reflected in everything I do because, again, I do not relate when people say they are employees. I've never been employed. I'm always unemployed. Yes. But then I got the opportunity to work with a lot of startups. And most of the time, I don't know if there are so many people here who work in early stage, fast-paced startups, but you know how it feels like. It's like in a bullet train, right? Everything is going so fast. You have to, like, if you are not, you easily be called out. And so, I was forced to learn a lot, and then also in order to create value as a consultant, because again, if you don't want to be employed, you obviously want to freelance or consult. And in consulting for early stage startup, they are not looking for somebody who is to come and say, okay, I'm giving you a user flow and that's it. No, they are looking for somebody who can actually contribute to the idea, conceptualization, can actually prototype, can actually help them with go-to-market strategies and things like that, even growth metrics and experiments and things like that. And so if you find yourself in a position like that, you're actually forced to learn a lot. And so, through educating others is really like, because again, people from health, people from finance, people from law, everybody reaches out to you and you're like, okay, I'm in law, I want to transition to product. How do I do this? What do you know about law? Do you relate? And I'm like, okay, I don't know much, but let me read about what lawyers do and then see how best, if a lawyer transitions to product or technology, how valuable they can become, right? So I end up reading about that and go back, teach them. I need to make sure that I know what I'm talking about, otherwise, So to me, it's about teaching others, really having more conversations with people, learning more, and it's really helped a lot.
Thank you. Some really great insights from teaching others, radical candor, from navigating relationship building, putting yourself out there. I want to dive a little bit deeper into this and also explore things from like unique perspective from your career journeys. For example, Agnes, you worked in product teams, worked adjacent to product teams. I think it's an interesting role to consider in the context of how it's supposed to impact the business, right? Because I think in certain roles you can like finish your work and like dust off your hands and you're like, I'm done for the day. But how do you think about the role of product and design professionals, not just in terms of succeeding with your relationship building with your manager and all those things that can be in a silo, but now should go beyond in terms of driving impact in a business?
So in terms of how do I think about driving impact, I think that's such an important question. I think regardless of whatever role you're in, so whether you are a product manager, product designer, software engineer, whether you are in QA, I think it's really important to first of all start with the understanding of, when you zoom out and you look at the finishing line, what does that finishing line look like? Can you visualize it? Can you quantify it? And that's what I generally start off with, I generally start off with the question of, what does success look like? Can we quantify it? Can we, paint, can we zoom out and paint that picture of what that finish line looks like? and build fluency around what it looks like. And what I mean by build fluency is each and every person who's working on that product, whether they're in the product team, whether they're in the engineering team, whether they're in the marketing team, they need to clearly understand what the end game is. They need to also clearly understand how they fit into that picture and how the work that they do is enabling us to walk towards the finish line. That is like number one. Like, so know your North Star, know how to measure it, and then build fluency around the entire team so that everyone knows how they fit into that picture. And then once you do that, honestly, it becomes much simpler now to move forward. Now you're basically, obviously you need to understand the persona who you're building it for. You need to clearly articulate that and understand their pain points, and then build out the MVP, the minimum viable product, and continue to test, iterate, and measure the goals as you move along.
So let me add a slightly, not different point, but to personalize it a bit more to someone who's starting out or is like mid in their career, maybe you're 2 to 3 years. It can be daunting to look at it that way, in the sense that it can be a bit daunting for you to think about the big picture at that point in time. And it's very easy for you to assume that you should not. And to be honest, that's a mistake, in the sense that when you have a macro view of what is going on, your individual contribution is more impactful than if you're just doing what you're being told to do. I think in our evolution of careers, especially in the African ecosystem with our culture and so on and so forth, we are used to that idea that when we are starting out, tunanyanyekea for the people like. And what it means is you become a mouse. Like you're just told what to do. You never really know why you're doing something. And one of the things that made a big difference for me when I was starting out at Pesapal, I joined as a web developer. So my job was just to implement what I was told by my manager and my seniors. But over time, I started spending more time with the customer, not even with my internal team, to better understand what we're trying to achieve. And once I did that, it showed me that there were gaps or opportunities that we were not taking advantage of. And I didn't go ahead and just do it. Of course, I talked to my manager, told him, I've seen this, we had this conversation, I think we should do this. And that part is, it's part one, taking initiative, but then the second part is, in anything you do, to the extent that you can, try and understand the broader goal so that you can see opportunities and areas that you would not if you just did what you were told to do. And the beauty is it's a muscle. That confidence and that vision is a muscle. When you start early, as you progress in your career, you get really better at it. And to be honest, that will turbocharge what you can achieve over time.
Cool. Okay, it's off. I think so. Hi. Okay. Just diving a bit deeper into what they say. I like to be very specific and practical, right? So I think based on what they said, right, you can categorize them into, let's say, 2 ways, right? Really about persuasion and inspiration, okay? I read a quote somewhere that says, being a manager is really about persuading people to do what they do not want to do. Being a leader is about inspiring people to do what they do not know or do not think they can do. And so having the greatest impact in your career is really mostly about these 2 things at the end of the day, right? And in order to achieve these things, right, there are things, right? It's about communication, it's about collaborating with others, and then again, having that leadership mindset in your mind. Communication, right? Am I able to clearly state communicate the value, impact, the goals of what we are trying to do, right? And we all know here that product management it's hell. Like, it's crazy, okay? Because again, you are expected to be bilingual. You speak design and tech. You are expected to read minds, right? You you are expected to understand people. You are expected to interact with the customers, right? You are expected to understand the business, right? And so all of these things come into play. And just you are supposed to you are miraculously expected to achieve those metrics and make them happen. And so when you want to create as much impact, being able to have these tools in your toolbox and being able to know how to use them. Again, people do so many courses, but it's just for the, again, I have this banter. I say it's like, it's not really about the framework. You can mention, I don't know a single framework, right? But it's really about understanding the goal or the impact or the purpose of that framework. Okay, so being able to clearly communicate a vision, rally everybody towards that vision is one of the biggest indicators of impact when you're a product manager. Another thing has to do with collaboration, because again, being bilingual, it means that you need to understand technology, you need to understand business, you need to understand design, okay? And one thing I came to really understand is, trust me, you do not want anyone between or come between you and the customer, the business owners, and then the people implementing, which is your product team, designers and engineers. Because when you do, the vision or the goals blur out. Now somebody else is basically re-communicating the things you need to communicate. For instance, I'm not against CX people, but then again, as a product manager, we'll both do the CX, okay? Because I want to, these people are saying I like me, sure. I want to interact with the customers, right? And that's the only way you understand. If you rely on design and research only, again, one thing I have come to realize, which mistake UX researchers and designers make, is they go out, do the thing on their own and bring and expect results or people to implement. People would usually easily overlook the effort you've put in. But then if you bring along the team that you are working with, right, you are going to the field and like, okay, this designer, come with me. And they sweat the pain of what you are doing, they will push for that to be implemented. That's one thing. And so as a product manager, you should know like literally everything about your product, everything about the market you are doing, and be able to communicate those and collaborate with the people you are working with. The other one has to be leadership. Are you able to mentor your team? Are you able to inspire them to do the things they are not doing? Because again, most part of my night, I would say 90% of my job is trying to solve people who are crying and angry, right? Because people come to you all the time like, this developer is maltreating me, this person is doing this, and you have to basically negotiate. So as a leader, you have to cultivate some of these things in order to make the greatest impact in your career. And that's how I see things, right? And basically the same thing they are saying, being able to persuade and inspire people, collaboration, communication, and leading people. Those are the things I personally think, and it has worked for me. So yeah.
Awesome. We're going to have a Q&A in just a bit. So in the meantime, feel free to like jot down and gather your thoughts around the question. Before we get to that, as we're talking about driving it back, is this first jump review article that talks about the stages of a product, and it describes the first stage of a product, a project management. And it gives a really interesting contextualization of product management. In fact, it's like the initial product, your main goal is building trust. Right? The CEO and his co-founder raise money from VCs, and so they'll come and tell what to do. And most CEOs who is in a product team or has been a product team like that, you have a CEO or another C-suite team member who is fairly opinionated about
what the product should look like and what to build. Great. Yeah, and I've had conversations on it. I think it would be interesting to hear what's the latest terms of like how do the product teams, product professionals build the trust in the C-suite. Because in practice you have to think about not just like entering the space, thinking you're the smartest person in the world. You're the one person that has to come out with their impact. But you could have unique insights, unique perspectives. That's part of the journey of strike in cars. Is that you to feature us build relations with you, because understand how to get place. It's so build a strong relationship comes.
Okay, I think I would deviate a little. A lot of us are in relationships, right? Oh, in Nairobi, okay. Okay, we all know trust is earned, no matter what. Nobody should lie to you. You need to earn the trust. So if you want people to trust you, up, down, you need to earn it. How do you earn trust in working in products, right? Let's be specific to tech. First thing is, again, you need to know your stuff. Like, you can't tell me to trust you blindly. I will not, right? Being a CPO, most of the time, it's like I'm basically evaluating, maybe reading a little bit about psychology, trying to observe people, how they communicate and things like that. And it's not very easy to impress me, right? And so if you do not portray or get me to trust you by sharing your knowledge and expertise and experience with me, it's going to be very difficult. So know your stuff. That's one thing. Another thing has to do with what I said, persuasion, right? It's really not about telling people what to do, right? Most of the time as a PM, it's the bad word to use, but you're literally begging people and trying to like convince them to believe in believe in your nonsense, right? And most of the time, most product managers are speaking nonsense. That's the truth. Okay? And so basically, you are trying to tell the smartest people in the room to believe your nonsense. And that is a skill you need. This is becoming a comedy show. You are basically trying to influence people to believe in what you are trying to say, right? So know your stuff, be able to persuade people. Another thing is basically, again, literally what I said, communication, right? To build trust, you need to be able to communicate, right? Be able to understand what the business owners want, communicate it down a strategy with actionable roadmap for people to implement, right? And so if you are not able to do this, for instance, I go to Kiri and I tell you, okay, I want to build a fintech app, revolutionize the fintech space in Kenya, and I want to do it socially, right? For me, that's all I can share. I shared my vision with you. You need to come back to me and tell me that, okay, from my experience, from talking to people or from doing this, this is a strategy that I think to work, and then this is like how we can get to market. And then this is like a roadmap, a reasonable roadmap that we can use. If you cannot do this, there is no way anybody is going to trust you. Okay? And so I think for me, and I would give to them to share their knowledge, but for me, these are the things that I think will build trust. Being in a C-suite, consulting with companies, working with startups, working with VC funds and all of those stuff. Literally, it's not secret. It's just that, right? These are very, very basic soft skills you need to build trust among the stakeholders and then the team you work with. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, go for it.
I think James has talked a lot about the persuasion part, and there's a tactical element to it. So at any given point in time, you'll be trying to convince different types of people to go in your way. You'll be talking probably to marketing, you'll be talking to design, you'll be talking to engineering, you're talking to your CEO. And Now, if you look at it from a design perspective, fundamentally as human beings, we are selfish.
Yeah.
If you're talking to the person in finance, they don't care about your roadmap. You can do whatever with that. They want to understand the effect it has on the bottom line.
Yeah.
Is it increasing revenue? Is it reducing cost? Is it increasing efficiency? When you're talking to marketing, okay, I don't talk to marketing, that's you. When you're talking to them, there is something they want. So there's actually a word James used, bilingual.
Yeah.
Bilingual basically means thinking about things more from a psychology perspective. If you're going to talk to the engineers, what is in for them to buy in? If you're talking to your CEO or your senior leadership, what is their selfish reason to invest in what you're trying to do? So in trying to persuade or sell, generally have different approaches and pitches for the people that you're working with, so that at the end of the day, everybody sees what's in for them, and then they can support you. And this is something that you keep doing and reinforcing. So just because you talk to your CEO when you are kicking off the project doesn't mean you won't talk to them until the end. So there's also a component of consistent communication and just keep making sure that people know things are going on and their selfish reason for doing it is still there. The last part, which people usually conflate, you do not need to be an extrovert to do all this.
Yeah.
So when I talk about talking, it's just communicating. So it's in the style that works for you, what you're confident with, what is authentic to you, as long as you pass the message on.
Awesome. Again, just a reminder, we'll have Q&A in a bit. Because of time, I'll just wrap up with two more questions. One is about, for anyone, just navigating the tech space and driving success outcomes as a minority. What are your own experiences in terms of like how to successfully navigate those hurdles? Yeah.
So, how to navigate the tech ecosystem?
As a minority.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And I think for me, I wish if there was a magic pill that I could purchase. Yeah, no, I was saying if there was a magic pill that I could purchase, and I'd be willing to pay anything for it, it would be a magic pill that helps to boost confidence. It's not something that you can teach. It's not something that someone can tell you and, you get it. So it's something that you need to continuously build your muscle around. And the reason I talk about confidence, particularly for us as Kenyans and even as a woman, right? I remember reading Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. And there's a sentence she said there that to this day, I still remember. And she said, visible work is more important than invisible work.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? That means that you can be the best product manager and you're killing it, you're crushing it. Like you're building all these features, the monthly active usage is high. But if no one knows about it, will you get recognized? Will you get the recognition? And so there's an art and a science to how you communicate the things that you're doing, the work that you're doing behind the scenes. And you have to be super consistent about it, internally and also externally. Because if you don't do it, which I've learned the painful way, is that either someone else will will decide to go ahead and, take up that recognition, or no one will know, how much time, how much work, how much impact you've made as a result of the work. So if there's something that I would say, like if you want to be able to navigate your career really well in this tech ecosystem, it would be that.
I can add on a few points based on my experience at Microsoft. So just for context, it's a company with 220,000 employees. Those are the full-time employees. You haven't talked about contractors, partners, vendors, and all that. And the way the company is structured, it's pay for impact. So literally what you earn in terms of promotion, salary increments, bonuses, and so on and so forth, it's based on the impact that you created within a certain period. So you get there as a Kenyan. Kenyans, we are humble. I think we understand what I mean. Like, we don't like talking about what we've done. Tunasema ni kujaribu tu. That time you're doing so well, like you've never done better than that before. So for me, it was actually interesting to notice that when I joined Microsoft, I had that Kenyanness in myself. Like, I would downplay the things that I've worked on. I would not communicate as effectively as my Redmond or my European colleagues. You would even see, because there was a culture of status updates, every month there's like a team that will do a proper update, outline all the things that they've done that month. They don't need to be like big things. But then I realized over time, mostly as the Kenyan counterparts, would wait for that, that big moment. You launched, it's gone to the general public. So never ever talking about process. What happens is that when now those conversations about compensation, promotions, and so on and so forth are happening, very few people know you, and that's to your disadvantage. So back to what she said, just getting rid of that natural instinct, not natural, Kenyan and African instinct to downplay your achievements and be humble. Don't be humble. You won't go far. And this also kind of extends outside and affects your progression. So one of the biggest things that made a good impact, a big impact in my career is I started writing early. Like when I was in JQuat learning J2Me. Do people here know what J2Me is? I'm dating myself. You do? We are the same age. So I learned quite early on to write, share, talk about my work, and just let people know. Because when people don't know, and people can be internal, so the people that you work with, your employer, your colleagues, and the other people are future employers or people who can open doors for you. If they don't know, they can never really calibrate what you can achieve. So if there's one thing you can take away from here today from me, try and work against that Kenyan African instinct to downplay and be humble about what you've done. Of course, you have to be tactical about how you do it. No one likes a braggart either. But yeah, just talk about your work. It doesn't need to be you've done the biggest thing in the world. It can be the smallest thing in the world, and it will make a difference in your life.
If there's one thing I'm taking from him, it's not to be humble. I want to be humble. Anyway, I think one thing that you mentioned that really helps a lot of product managers is all can be or doom is really about not being able to measure success. Sometimes we focus on, I've done this much work, I've done this, I've done that, created a strategy and everything, right? At the end of the day, what shows that the business has succeeded is not about your input, it's about the outcome, right? You can be very good, but if the outcomes are not good, they do not achieve the goals, you have failed, okay? And I wish you can actually talk more about stuff like metrics and measurements, because I think it's very, very important that most people know. I learned some of these things when I was working with startups, and it's something most people don't teach, right? So you learn about things like flywheels, economic of scale, things like that. You talk about product metrics. What are success metrics, right? What are the success metrics you're looking to define? How do you measure those along the product life cycle? Things like product strategy. How many people can actually build a product strategy, a winning product strategy in this room, right? These are things that are soft and hard skills that I think also contribute to your success as a PM, even anywhere, whatever you are, project manager, associate project manager, whatever you are. If you are able to understand some of these metrics, I think it's very important. Things like go-to-market. How many of us can actually build a go-to-market strategy, right? Things like PMF. What do we know about product market fit? Things like AAA, RRR metrics. How do we know funnels? How the product is affected based on the funnels? What are we focusing on? All of these things contribute to how you prioritize the things you work on. And I think it would be very important she does a session on that, because I think a lot of people, especially mid-level product designers, do not know most of these things. I didn't know. I'm still mid-level, I guess, and I'm still learning, right? And I know it's very important because the moment I started learning about growth strategy and things like that, my conversations with people changed because it's now data-driven, it's now outcome-based, right? And so, session next week.
You were suggesting that you have a session for that, and to be honest, it's an entire topic by itself. Yeah. We won't be able to cover it, but just two things to consider. Your role as a product manager in terms of measuring impact is either you're making money for the company or you're cutting costs. Yeah. So everything kind of has to cascade to that, because the other activities are things that contribute to that main output. There might be variations along the way, but it's those two. Companies exist to create impact, but at the end of the day, one of the biggest measurements is the financial aspect, especially if you're in a for-profit company.
Yeah. Awesome. Any questions coming up? If not, may I have many so I can just keep going? Okay, I see Victoria has one. Okay, cool. A couple of questions coming in. As we go into that, last thing I wanted you guys to share is, well, not last thing, but last question for me is about success. Who do you admire? Who do you consider successful and why?
Me?
Yeah, sure.
I have so much pride as he points. I'm taking his advice. I admire myself.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a tough question because there's so many people that I admire. I think for me, to be honest, most of the people that I admire are entrepreneurs because I kind of always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've tried multiple ventures, but have not made it yet. So I'm an aspiring entrepreneur. But yeah, I was recently, having a conversation with this guy who reached out to me via LinkedIn, and he started out, this guy he's a Kenyan, probably right now in his late 20s, did not go to university, started out his career as a boda, and is now building out a tech logistics platform. I mean, wow. To me, those are things that are really impressive. And so I would say that, people like, Africans who are building amazing products that are changing lives every single day, or creating more access or democratizing access to jobs or opportunities. And there's so many companies that are doing that right now. Those are the people who I admire.
Okay, similar to Agnes, a lot of the people that I admire are entrepreneurs. So if you look at the Silicon Valley space, the people who are really for front runners would change the industry. I won't delve into that because I also have quite a number of people locally I admire. So the first person is a guy called Augusta Lico, founder of Pesafal. I admire him for his stubbornness. Like he's made that thing work. He's not gone through the traditional venture building process. Is kind of new. If you figure out a real problem, solve it the right way, have your unit economics right, you will do really well. Like literally you will go to a kinyozi and the PDQ they are using is Pesafal. The second person I admire is a lady called Wawira, Food for Education. I admire her for her push to change something that she saw in society and felt was impactful. It's easy to go for the money or for the prestige. I was fortunate to meet her a bit early on before she became well known, and I've seen what she's been able to do over that time. The other person I admire is Kipchoge, the king himself, because of his discipline. I don't think I've ever seen someone so intentional and disciplined about how they do things, how they prepare, and how they see the world. It's just phenomenal. I have a lot more people, and I would encourage you, like within the room, it's actually a very good idea to have someone that you look up to, and the closer the better. Once upon a time, and don't quote me, I used to look up to Elon Musk. But hey, lately, is you stay around long enough to be the villain. So I feel that has been the case. So I've really found a lot of cases and people across the continent who are doing phenomenal things in ways that actually work for us. Yeah, so those are the people I look up to. So.
Round of applause for all of the people they've shared. And I love the fact that Kirui also mentioned local people, right? These are like our local superheroes in tech and in other entrepreneurship and athletics and other spaces. So I was killing time so we could get some of the mics passed around. I think Victoria has one. And then you can pass one. I think Wangari also has a question. Cool. Victoria, how about you start? Okay, you can use this.
Thanks, Lem. Thanks, Kirui, James, and Agnes. It's been amazing just sitting next to you. I feel like when he says, look for your heroes who are closer, literally. Thank you so much for all the nuggets of wisdom you've shared. I'm learning so much. It's always such a privilege joining the product meetups. I have two questions. So the first one is around, you mentioned just making sure you have a sense of a North Star, something you're heading towards, something you're building towards, even right now when you're in early career, when you're in your mid-career. But what happens when your North Star keeps on changing? So when you're in an iterative process of trying to refine exactly where you want to go, exactly what you want to do, like you, Kirui, I've had jumps all over the place trying to figure out what that is. And I know you've gone through a similar journey, just refining and building your North Star and making sure you're building towards something specific. You mentioned you're in consulting, you did a bit of designing, now you're in product, now you're heading towards your what's next. Maybe what are some knowledge or wisdom you've carried along the way that has helped you refine your North Star, particularly having tried different fields and making yourself valuable and impactful to employers, in your organizations, in your career? That's the first question. The second one is around just holding yourself back and being an enemy to your own progress. Particularly this one is to you, Agnes. So something that happens often is when you're trying to really refine and you're heading closer towards something specific, it becomes scary, because now it removes every other option you have. I think during our last product meetup, when we were trying to define your career, where you're heading, what people want to do, we realized that a conversation came up about just knowing exactly what you want to do and giving yourself options. a debate was that when you give yourself options, you're giving yourself a reason to fail. Versus when you have one goal, you are all in, no failing and all that. So I guess in summary, what do you do when you're holding yourself back? You know exactly where you want to go, but you're your own enemy to progress. What are some nuggets of wisdom you can share on that? I'd also like to hear from you. James.
You already know my answer. Have pride.
Though that's a very interesting question. So I want to try and answer both of the questions, and I'll obviously hand it over to Kirui. And the reason why I'm really interested in responding to this question is because I'm actually going through that right now as we speak. So in terms of, you talked about identifying and defining your North Star when it comes to your career and being super clear about what your next role is, the next company that you're going to work at. And sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't always work. And the reason why sometimes it doesn't always work, it's not necessarily because you're not driven, you're not great at your craft, but because sometimes the opportunities are just not there. And I'll give you a great example. Last year, I really wanted to work at Google. Like, there was this job that was just for me. I mean, like, and it was a product role. And I was like, yep, this is it. I've always wanted to work at Google. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that I land that role. I had the connections. I had the expertise. I even, enrolled in a course. I even, I literally used to spend, my evenings, preparing for the interview because I had other people who were also applying for similar roles at Google and Amazon and everything. And we used to prepare and everything. And so I had the first 2 interviews, which all went really well. And then I was scheduled to go for my 3rd interview. And I was all prepped up. I was all ready. And then I get this email from the recruiter. And she's like, hey, Agnes, can we have a call? So I was like, yeah, sure. So she calls me and she tells me, by the way, they've just paused this role. And we've seen this happen time and time again. I mean, the reality is that the market in which we're in, it's become more uncertain. The roles that you would have thought you would have gotten, sometimes it just doesn't work. And so sometimes you need to have a plan B. And that's what it was for me. And so now going back to the question that you asked about, what are some of the things that you can do to, first of all, uncover the things that are sort of preventing you or are standing in the way of you being able to achieve your success? So I've invested in an executive coach, and I did that because, again, I tried to get that perfect role and I didn't. And I was like, okay, now what's the next step? And so one of the things that I'm going through, which is an exercise that I wish I had done much earlier in my career, is a couple of things. So the first thing is conduct a personal SWOT analysis, which is, first of all, know your strengths. Know what you're good at, naturally good at, the skills that you're good at, your experiences. What do you bring to the table? Know also what areas you can improve on. Then also, obviously, look at the opportunities, look at the threats. So there's the SWOT analysis that needs to be done. But then there's another framework that I think is really important, even as you're beginning to assess different opportunities. Because now, remember, yes, you should aim for your North Star, but you also need to have a backup plan, just in case it doesn't work, right? Yeah. And so the framework that I learned is you need to look at what your current opportunity is. You need to look at what your future opportunity could potentially look at. And for me, the way in which I did that was I started asking myself, okay, with the current opportunity that I have currently with Andela, who are the people that I want to continue to make sure that I connect with in my present, role? But then even if I do choose to transition outside of Andela, who are the people who could potentially unlock future opportunities for me? And so the first person for me was the CEO and co-founder of Andela. Like, I made sure that I want to make sure that I stay in touch with this person. I want to make sure he knows my name. He knows the impact that I'm making in this organization. But also I want to make sure that, we have this sort of connection that I can reach out to him if need be, in case for a future role. I don't know what that future role looks like right now, right? But kind of have a good sense that, he could be someone who could either give me some really good advice or unlock some future opportunities. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way is also, as you're thinking about your future opportunities and you're mapping out the spaces or the domains and the verticals that you want to make an impact in, begin to list out the people you need to engage with. In my personal experience, I'm now transitioning back into the fintech space. That's a conversation for another time. We'll talk about it. But, being 5 years away from fintech, I knew, hey, man, I need to learn a lot, right? And so I started to list out who are the people who I can learn from, who are the individuals I can reach out to who can give me like real candid feedback about my CV, my resume, who can tell me, hey, here's what we think you're good at, but also here's where we think that you might need to double down and sort of like improve on. And then, just listing out where are the opportunities, and having that sort of like framework that helps you map out a way in which you can be able to open up the next opportunity in the future. Yeah.
Okay, so just to explain this, and as you mentioned, my career has been quite meandering. So let me start by taking you through my career. I started off at Pesapal as a web dev, then at some point, web dev plus project manager. I was there for 10 months, went into consulting. So I used to build APIs. That was the only thing that I did. And then in the process of doing that, I ended up working with iHub as one of the consultants. Then something interesting happened. The person who used to lead the team quit abruptly. They gave me a 3-month contract to hold the fort as they look for someone to run the team. Those 3 months turned into 3 years. I left iHub, spent 4 months doing nothing. And I even had a good excuse. I never used to pay for anything when I hung out with my friends because I was not employed. After the 4 months, I joined Eneza as the head of product. I was only there for 6 months, went back into consulting for, I think, another 3 months, started my own company, Made by People, left Made by People after 3 years, and then joined Microsoft. It looks very random and haphazard, but there's a logic to it. So I look at it from a career stage perspective. When you're starting out, you're exploring. One of the things that I believe in is you can do more than one thing. You can be good at more than one thing. So the first thing is do not force yourself early on to say you're a product manager, you're a designer. I've been a dev, I've been a project manager, I've been a product manager, I've done sales, I've done recruitment, like I've done everything I could. So do not define yourself early on in one role, but work towards figuring out what you're good at and enjoy, but can also like pay you and looks promising. I mean, you can be very good at something, but it doesn't make any money. It doesn't take you that far. So in the beginning, explore, understand, and be willing to take the risk that things would fail. Like you just go in and see if this is something that you like and if it's something that you're good at. Once you figure that part out, now you can start being a bit more intentional. And the way I'm now more intentional is I look at what I do as an experiment. So when I was moving from Eneza to starting my own company, I was like, I'm going to run the company for 2 to 3 years. If it doesn't work out, I'll try something else. When I joined Microsoft, I knew I was going to be there again for 2 to 3 years and try something else. But the something else is quite defined. Either I'm going back to entrepreneurship, being a startup founder, I'm going to be a product manager, or I'm going to go back into UX and design. So early on, explore, know what you like, and then define it, but not one thing. There's a book by, sorry, just a sec. It's called Range, How Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. We've moved away from hyper-specialization. You bring more to the table if you can do 2 to 3 things. Yeah, so keep that framework in mind and do not be afraid to fail. It can backfire spectacularly, but do not be afraid.
Awesome. James, you want to add to that? Okay, we're going to take 2 more questions. I'll hand the mic back to James. We're going to take 2 more questions, but because of time, we'll try and keep the responses brief. And then our leaders are going to hang around. We have a bit coming up after this, but they're going to hang around. You'll get a chance to talk to them. And then later on, even after the event, they're not going anywhere. We figured out a way to make sure that they stay connected to the community, not just by attending our meetups, but by linking them to different peer groups that they can mentor in the long term. So you'll be matched to people in this room who have similar goals to you, and you'll have a regular cadence of syncing with these leaders, Wangari, and a few others. Wangari is hearing about this now, but we'll talk about we'll talk more about it after this. But I just wanted to mention that because I know we want to be respectful of your time, and we want to make sure you get the most value from them in right now and later on.
Okay, I think a lot of people have this specific issue. 3 things. I think the first thing, these are things that work for me. Imposter syndrome is real, okay? It's not just something that junior people or mid-level people face. Senior people face that. You're having conversation with some people and then you're like, okay, where is this coming from, right? And then you draw back and like, okay, so I don't know nothing about nothing, right? And that's the valley of doom, where you realize that you don't know anything. And then people get depressed because of this. So I think don't shy away from asking for help. I'm sure by now I'll probably be a PM at Google, but because I'm stubborn and I have too much pride, I don't ask for help. So I'm here. I'm happy. I'm just kidding, by the way. I'm happy where I am anyway. So yeah, don't shy away from help, asking for help. And the other thing is, look, there is always a shortcut for something. Ask him, right? Ask him how he became a PM at Microsoft. He will give you bullet points. You don't need to do research for 10 years to understand how to pass an interview. That's the shortcut. Find somebody who can tell you, give you the insights and everything, and you are good to go. Don't try to learn everything on your own. You cannot. And that's a promise. Get somebody who can teach you. If you are a PM in a fintech company, look for a CPO in a bigger fintech company and talk to them. They will share everything with you. You don't have to read 10 books to. By the way, if you don't read, your mind will be small. So yeah, that's all I can say. Yeah, if you want a shortcut, talk to somebody who knows what they're about.
All right, two more questions. I think Wangari had one.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for talking about career success. Just a question around, you mentioned a really good point that product managers need to start thinking of growth metrics, product strategy. How do you do that when a lot of organizations are like they're separate department? There's a product department, there's a growth department. Like you have no idea what happens. They're giving you targets. And I think sometimes probably startups, that's where startups are great. You can like explore and do other things. But big corporates, it's really hard to understand. Like you need to know these metrics to be successful. Then another question I had, I love how you talked about, I don't think career success is linear. It has its ups, downs. Sometimes you're head of product, sometimes you're washing things. How do you differentiate between your career and providing, whether it's providing for yourself, providing for your family? Because at some point, careers have an ego attached to them. And providing for your family or providing for yourself, you just need to put food on the table. Whether it's starting an OnlyFans, whether it's being a sweeper, how do you... The market is tough, guys. Let's be honest. It's tough. There's a lot of people here without, looking for jobs. Tech is having layoffs. There is an economic crisis. So it's all doom and gloom. If you're going to be stuck, I want to be a product manager, I want to be in tech. How do you navigate, detach yourself from that and figure out how to, the finance side of it? Especially with pride. I'd love to know that.
Some great questions.
Okay.
Okay, the financial angle is actually very important. So I don't come from a rich family. I don't have that safety net of falling back into. So there are quite a number of parts to it. The first one is just being financially responsible. When I'm working, I make sure I save for a rainy day. And then the second part is not being afraid to step back. So a lot of the times I've been in between jobs. When I got back into the space, I actually went higher than where I was. So I usually say, you can't shame someone who's not shameless.
Yeah, exactly.
And that goes with the ego. So on my side, I've never been afraid of losing a job, being broke, and so on and so forth. And I share it publicly. So then there's no way you're going to shame me if I beat you to it. So get rid of the ego. The other part, I think, broadly, when you look at your career, it's not linear. And you have to be comfortable with that. It's a very uncomfortable feeling, but you just have to acknowledge that one day things will be going very well, and at other times things will be going poorly. Yeah, so it's really fighting the social part to it. And unfortunately, that has to come from you. So the social part, and also being better at financially planning, knowing this decision has this risk, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that has really worked well for me.
Okay, I think I forgot part of your question, but I think one thing is which women usually have a better intuition is to know whether they fit in the right place or not, right? Relationships, whatever, right? So one thing most people forget about is the importance of culture, okay? Company culture. And this is something I've struggled with for several years. And I had to get somebody to mentor me on that because I started leading teams and all of those stuff, right? So if you're having issues where things are segregated, everybody has different goals and expectations, and you think that is not setting you up for success, you are not in the right place, okay? Products are built together. There is a unique single vision, and there is a strategy to get there. Let's work together to get there. So if the company culture is about isolating people, getting them to compete against each other, that is not a company you want to be part of, right? And that is the reason why I never applied for a job in big tech. Yeah, it happens a lot. And you can make little impacts. I wonder how you made it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Price, like, if today you lost everything,
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So it's very risky to design your career around good environment and good factors. Like you do have to acknowledge that people are messy, which makes companies messy. So what tools do you equip yourself with to navigate such issues? And one of the things that has really worked well for me is influencing, going out of my way to understand the bigger picture so that in any conversation that I'm having, I'm not just contributing what is expected of me or what I'm paid to do. So you talked about product strategy, roadmap, and that type of a thing. For a long time, I spent like my own time learning how do you do a product strategy? How do you create and communicate an effective roadmap? And I was in rooms, especially when I used to run my own company, you have clients who are really, really big and they think they know everything. But because I was able to get into that room and show them a different viewpoint by selling my expertise the way I see it, I was able to not move a rank higher, just get more done. So yeah, do not design your career around a perfect environment. I don't think there's any company in the world, even James's company, that has the perfect culture. You just have to be comfortable navigating, influencing, and just getting people to buy in and see your angle. Yeah, ideal doesn't work most of the times.
But we aim for ideal, right? But he's right. Nothing is perfect anywhere, but you work towards that. You know a good company when you're part of it. It's a fact. You know that. About pride, I'm not proud, unfortunately. As much as I want to be, I think I'm humble. Um, I'm always broke. I'm sure after a year I'll follow him. But yeah, when I lose everything, the mistake people make is to think they have to rely on external factors. The only person that can stop you is you. The only value you can give is here. You understand? So what do you mean by when you lose everything? Do you lose your mind? Unless you're mad, right? So you can always create value as far as you have it. That is why it's very important to nourish your mind, learn from people, and improve. You can lose everything. Steve Jobs lost everything, but then he's still a legend because he has this. So that's all.
I think the only thing I would add there, like in terms of the question around, the question was around more around like, if you were like, okay, about pride and your career and everything. I think the way, yeah, what both of them said is very true. Like you really need to be able to navigate your career really well, build influence. But even beyond that, again, as someone also said, you're going to have highs and lows in your career. Let's just be real, right? And so one of the things that I've learned to do, which has helped me, is I've learned to fill myself up outside of my career. So it stops being that my title at work defines me. You know, you have to go beyond that. And so shameless plug here, I'm also a podcaster and I also published my own newsletter. And the reason I did that was because, yes, I went through those moments in my career when it took a downturn and I needed to find something that would fill my cup, you know, and would make me more passionate about the things that I was doing. And so that's what I would encourage you is continue to find ways to fill your cup, continue to find ways in which you can, have like your passion project. We talk about that. I think Kenyans were also really good about the side hustles. Those help, they do, yeah.
Cool. Because of time, I'm gonna ask, unless you know how in school there's like that person who's like natuja patiwa cat. So unless you want to be that person, yeah. Is it Bunny? You.
Great, thank you so much. My name is Marianne. I'm a design researcher, consultant. I think mine is two things. To emphasize on something Agnes said. Agnes is my former colleague. Kirui, who are you again? Kirui is a very good friend and ex-Microsoft. That's the new title now, but I've sort of like worked with everyone there. James, I mentor on their platform. And so one thing that I would want to say is I'll share this as my own experience, but also like how that relates to what Agnes said. So 2 years ago, I quit my dream job, or something that everyone would say, that's a dream job, right? I used to work for IDEO. If you're familiar with IDEO.org, I used to work as a senior designer there. And then 2 years into that role, I remember going on vacation and coming back and sending in a resignation letter, right? A lot of the messages I get on LinkedIn is, how do you quit, like a job that most people would want to have today? And I think a lot of that has a lot to do with, we associate our value with companies and names and titles. And you forget about what you are as a person. You forget about the value that you bring into the industry and into the community. 3 years later, I work as a full-time consultant. Never looked for work like James here. I've gotten over 20, 30 jobs, handed over to me. But at the end of the day, it goes back to, what am I looking for and what value am I bringing into the industry? And so I would say, as people who are growing into the industry, stop looking at the bigger, I feel like a lot of people, even when you go for mentorship sessions, a lot of people will ask you, how can I land a job here? Or what do I need to do to get, but what are you doing where you are that will make you be able to earn that next role? So if you can't detach your value from the bigger organizations, look at the smaller startups, like Kiri mentioned earlier, Wawera in the company that she's working, they have a huge impact within the market. So if we can stop associating the value of the work or the work that we do with the bigger companies, then you can start to see your career being a little bit more fulfilling. Thank you.
Awesome. It's a really great parting shot. I think we'll wrap up there for today with the fireside chat, but we do have a little bit more coming up. How'd you guys enjoy that session? Yeah. It's really exciting to be by the fireside. I was telling Agnes earlier about how even as Africans, like we have historically, oral tradition is a big part of our culture. And I'm sure all of you have learned a lot more during this kind of a session as opposed to going through articles on LinkedIn or different platforms. So we're looking forward to having more sessions like this. I'm gonna call up Brenda to come with some gifts for our parting shots as the gifts come over. Starting with you, Kiri.
Now, why did I ask for that? Anyway, just to reiterate something that I've learned, and it's a quote that a friend mentioned when I shared that I lost my job at Microsoft. The confidence of a bird is not on the branch, it's on its wings. Yeah. Keep working on you, and you will be okay.
Yeah. I think for me, my parting shot is I think I'm now learning to take more risks, and I'm now learning to look at my career actually as an adventure. So these days, I don't define my career as, I focus more on what can I learn in that role, regardless of whether the title is, whether it's a mid-level role or whether it's a senior role or whether the brand is a great brand. Those things stop mattering at some point. At some point, when you're clear about where you want to go and what you want to be able to achieve, you extract those things and you focus on the things that are really important, and you begin to ask yourself, what adventure do I want to create for myself? And so what I would say is spend time thinking about the adventure you want to create and have fun. Have fun. Have fun during the good times. Have fun also when you're failing. It's an adventure. Have fun.
So for me, I would say part of your career, or most part, is about prioritization, and it translates to your life. So for anybody looking to succeed, the main thing is to keep the main thing. Okay? The main thing is to keep the main thing. If you deviate, it's going to take a long time. So be able to prioritize your life, your job, everything. Know what's important. Know when you have to do things, and yeah, you'll be fine.